Hello, folks. My name is Josh Chilton. It is a sad Tuesday, April 7th, as we await what is going to happen, whether Trump is going to unilaterally decide to commit war crimes and terrorism to a level that we have not seen since World War II. But the point of this video, what I want to talk about today, perhaps even if it's just a distraction from the loss of lives that are going to take place over the next coming hours, if we are to believe Trump. Now, who knows what he's really going to do? But I want to talk about when leaders talk about war, like anyone in a leadership role, when they talk about war, the words they choose matter. And when the president or the so-called self-proclaimed secretary of war, Pete Hegseth, talks about war, his words matter. And so let's hear what Pete Hegseth has, it says defense secretary on C-SPAN, but he calls himself the war secretary. Let's hear how he was framing the rescue operation that the Trump administration used as a big show to, tell the world how great this war was going, when the reality on the ground is so much far different from that. But let's listen to Pete here.
One downed airman evaded capture for more than a day, scaling rugged ridges while hunted by the enemy. When he was finally able to activate his emergency transponder, his first message was simple and it was powerful. He sent a message: God is good. In that moment of isolation and danger, his faith and fighting spirit shone through. You see, shot down on a Friday, Good Friday, hidden in a cave, a crevice, all of Saturday, and rescued on Sunday, flown out of Iran as the sun was rising on Easter Sunday. A pilot reborn, all home and accounted for, a nation rejoicing. God is good. Despite incoming fire and unforgiving conditions, our troops brought every American home. No American lives were lost.
So that's the main part I wanted to show there. And, some of that language just feels almost ancient, right? And as the United States becomes increasingly involved with this conflict in Iran, and now to the point where Trump is threatening to genocide the entire country, I think it's time for us to start asking ourselves an uncomfortable question. It'll be uncomfortable for a lot of my audience, I think, at least. Are we witnessing a foreign policy shaped by a modern version of the Crusades? And so for those of you who might not know, the Crusades took place from the years 1096 to 1291, so almost 300 years. And the Western European kind of allied kingdoms around 1,000 years ago decided that they wanted to recapture Jerusalem from the Muslims. And so they initially captured it. We'll get to how it turned out in the end later, after 300 years and the slaughter of millions of Muslims. But, the way his remarks, and the more we get to know about Pete Hegseth, if you don't already know, the more you're able to start putting together the pieces of why he talks the way he does. So I can never say it right. Deuce Volt. So that was kind of the calling cry to war at the beginning of the Crusades. And it was, it means, what does it mean again? I can't even remember at the moment. What does it mean? It means God's will, or God's will be done, or God wills it. Yeah, it means God wills it. And so basically, what we can infer from this statement is God wills that Christians should dominate. That's been the conversation in the United States, and best believe that this war leaves the Middle East, it will be coming back home. There is a deep state beneath Trump, and through the infrastructure and organizational, formulation that was put forth in Project 2025 to, morph the Constitution of the United States, the trajectory of the United States into a Christian nationalist country. And so, the irony here is that we are becoming more and more like the very thing that we say we are trying to stop and prevent, which is religious extremism. But if you look into the studies of terrorism, the work of, the likes of like Martha Crenshaw, who was one of the leading pioneers in the study of terrorism, we'll start to see a pattern of radicalization that is taking place amongst the furthest right-wing religious evangelical fundamentalists. And a certain segment of those, Doug Wilson's pastors, Doug Wilson of the Moscow, Idaho cult, Dale Partridge is, one of his mutant babies who has now planted a church in DC to disciple Pete Hegseth, our Secretary of War, while we're undertaking, a full-scale, apparently destroying an entire civilization. So, when Pete Hegseth starts to use language about defending civilization, standing against evil, and fighting for the moral order, these phrases resonate with many Americans, right? Especially if you do lean more evangelical Christian, and you may not be, at the furthest end of the Christian nationalist perspective, but some of those phrases may resonate with you. And I want you to start questioning why. Because to me, it echoes something much older, and it's the religious wars of medieval Europe. The Crusades, like, they ultimately failed to achieve their primary goal, but let there be no mistake. The primary goal was securing permanent Christian control over the Holy Land. And so every time you hear Trump or a neocon or a Zionist, talk about, we've been dealing with this situation for 49 years. They're talking about the bombing of an embassy that happened in 1979, but what they're really talking about is, underneath it, the desire for Christian control over the Holy Land, right? And when political conflict is framed in moral and even spiritual terms like that, the nuance, the need for or desire for diplomacy disappears. And, we start to see ordinary people look at nations of mothers, fathers, grandparents, children, grandchildren as just religions instead of human beings who are trying to survive and live together on the same planet. For many people in the Muslim world, the word crusade is not just a metaphor. It's like historical trauma that's built into their culture and tradition. It's a different thing from their perspective. For many American Christians, it's such distant history, and it can even, and that's why it can be used as a symbol of courage or faith for a male who doesn't see strong masculine leadership in the Democratic Party or within liberal spaces, and even in moderate conservative spaces. So they go looking for it. And what's better than telling them that they are warriors who have been ordained by God to take global dominion for Christ? I mean, what is a more powerful narrative if you actually could believe that about yourself and have the arrogance to believe that about yourself? Like, what a more powerful narrative than that? So, it's just this whole rhetoric around this and the whole framing of huge swaths of people as one thing or another. Like, even as I talk about Christian nationalists, there is there's a scale. There's a scale. There are people who adhere to it, people who sympathize to it, people who are a little skeptical to it, but and then there's the furthest extreme of people who are violent advocates for it. But those are the small percentages. But we're running the risk now because of Pete Hegseth and Trump, the evil of Trump and the axis of Epstein and the billionaire class, who is making money off of the market fluctuation with oil prices. Like, Trump's just telling his friends when he, every weekend when he's about to drop his good news. But I digress. The main thing that I'm wanting to talk about in this video is faith and power. A large portion of the American electorate are made up of devout Christians. There are many Christianities, though, right? And most Christians view the world through theological lenses. And some even believe conflicts in the Middle East carry spiritual significance tied to biblical prophecy. And then it's gotten tied into the defense and preservation of Christian civilization, which can also be a dog whistle and code for like white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, keeping us. I'm a white Anglo-Saxon. I'm just not Protestant anymore. I'm a heretic, I guess you would call me. But keeping us at the top of the hierarchy. How much does this worldview influence political messaging? And how much does political messaging reinforce this worldview? And who is benefiting from these narratives? War reshapes economies, like I already said, as these markets react to the Trump chaos. Certain industries are profiting off of this, right? The average American isn't. We're all suffering and paying higher prices, right? It's nothing compared to the price that some across the globe are going to have to pay. If you watch the latest episode of Diary of a CEO, you'll have one economist who is saying if this lasts 3 months, we're looking at worldwide catastrophe. But who benefits from all of this? It's still Trump. Even with his ratings going down, he's still making money. He's still helping his friends. Putin, his secret best ally, and the one who probably has the most dirt on him, either Bibi or Putin, they're becoming huge players on the global scene. And so, for some voters, the idea, what I don't want us to get captured by is like the idea that standing firm against perceived enemies of Western or Christian civilization is like deeply a deeply compelling argument. Because when political identity, national identity, and religious identity begin to overlap, I think that's what the founders had seen already, and we're trying to get away from, because it creates fertile ground for seeing policy, including foreign policy, as not just strategy or trying to serve the interests of the people, but like a sacred duty. And when you combine that with the crusader mindset, it's just that's a big part that's underspoken of how we got to where we are. It's not necessarily that Trump is some Christian. Obviously, he's not, but he's adopted the crusader mindset almost more than any of them. None of them are real Christians, right? Like, they don't follow a single teaching of Jesus. Like, Jesus told us to love our enemies. That's what Jesus taught us. Like, I'm a red letter, whatever Jesus taught, like, that's some pretty good enlightened spiritual guidance. And self-sacrificial love is a great thing if viewed in the right light. But if we just make a conflict about Americans good versus, Iran's evil, Christian believer versus unbeliever, civilization versus barbarians, is there any room left for empathy? Is there, what happens to the millions of people, the millions of innocent people who get caught up inside the destruction of that little story we have the luxury to tell ourselves while we're living over here in the States? And what happens to Americans of Arab descent, Muslim faith, like who are feeling the weight of that narrative here at home? And so the core question, that we have to ask ourselves plainly is the United States right now fighting a strategic geopolitical conflict, or is it drifting into something that resembles a modern crusade in the public's imagination? And if it's the latter, even in perception, what risks does that carry for the world? So, I'm not claiming to be a scholar. I minored in history, but from what I've seen, history shows us that when wars are framed as holy, such as the Crusades, they become harder to end. 300 years, harder to question. Don't become a heretic like me. Harder to question, right? Harder to humanize. You just start slaughtering people and killing people. We saw it in World War II. We've seen this same playbook. It's not new. It's recycled. They're using the weapons of mass destruction, same lie that Dick Cheney used like 20 some years ago, and it's working on the majority of the hardcore MAGAs. It's like, come on, people, man. Maybe the most important question isn't about Iran right now. It's about politicians who we've empowered, Donald J. Trump, who needs the 25th Amendment evoked on him as soon as possible before we are all fighting for food and water. Maybe we need to ask the question, how do we talk about war without turning it into a story of saints and sinners? There's so much more nuance and complexity to this. I urge you guys, if you're supporting this war, to go back and look at what happened in the Crusades. I just Googled How did the Crusades turn out? That's what I Googled, just for fun. Key outcomes and consequences. Military failure. Except for the initial success, the subsequent major crusades failed to hold Jerusalem or the Crusader states, with it finally falling in 1291. They were betrayed. There's going to be infighting within this Christian nationalist movement. They're the biggest drama queens I've ever seen in my life, to be talking about how much we need masculine leadership. Oh, we need masculine leadership. All of y'all, A.D. Robles, I'm calling you out. You're a drama queen. Joel Webbin, I'm calling you out. You're a drama queen. John Harris, I'm calling you out. You're a drama queen. You're all a bunch of drama queens. Evangelical dark web, you're a drama queen. Religious divisions, it even worsened the relationships between Christians. And the crusading movement was also used within Europe. And there was it just only created violence. Violence begets violence, right? So that's basically the point of this video. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. This is just my thoughts, my feelings, an alternative, perhaps, way of looking at it at 3:44 p.m. Eastern Time in Charlotte, North Carolina on Tuesday, April 7th, 2026. I appreciate you watching. It takes you no time. Just hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, help me get this out to more people, because I think I have a perspective that is unique and that can contribute, hopefully, to more fruitful discussions in the future. Until then, we'll see you guys next time. Peace.